Hello everyone, welcome to the World Series of Board Gaming's How to Win series. Today we're teaching you the 5 tips on how you can destroy your opponents in the castles of Burgundy. Steffenfeld's arguable masterpiece. Steffenfeld is an incredible designer. I was thrilled when we added Castles of Burgundy to the lineup, and what was even more thrilling is that the Castles of Burgundy winner went on to win the $25,000 prize at the World Series of Board Gaming. Not only that, we just had a regional qualifier at Level Up in New Jersey, the Level Up Gaming Retreat in New Jersey, and the person who won the Castles of Burgundy mini event also won the entire mini tournament. There's something in the water about being a good Castles of Burgundy player, and I'm here to give you all the tips that you need to come out on top. And if you're already a Castles of Burgundy player and you know these tips that I'm about to tell you, well, what are you waiting for? Sign up right now for the World Series of Board Gaming in Las Vegas, September 22nd to the 26th, with our exclusive code that ends April 1st. You want to capitalize on this, save yourself some money. Here's what I'm talking about.
You could win your share of $100,000 in cash and prizes just for playing board games. The World Series of Board Gaming is back and bigger than ever. High-level play, friendly competition, national championships, there's no other event of its kind. Are you the next big name in board gaming? Get your tickets now at WSBGVegas.com and use the code IMN to save yourself up to $50. What are you waiting for? It's time to get in the game.
So get your tickets before April 1st. Make sure you get your tickets to one of the most friendly and yet competitive events. Those two things don't seem like they should mesh, but at WSBG, they absolutely do. Every person who I've met at the event is just so friggin' awesome, because us board gamers are awesome. And let's get board gaming on the main stage like we know it can be. And if you're worried about competing, don't worry. There's also an open gaming ticket, which gets you into the Dice Tower West library. It's just like a Dice Tower West with less people in the fall. It's perfect. There's another new ticket, the Wargaming Invitational, if you want to play in a bunch of war games as well. We need to get those signups locked in so we can see if we're going to book the hotel and the space for an extra day so that we can run that thing. So if any of those things are interesting to you, make sure you sign up now. It's great for us to lock things in, and there is a tier of ticket for everyone. There really is. And also, the hotel rate goes fast. So especially if you want to extend the trip and make it more of a vacation, a little bit of a journey, throw in some board gaming on the side, see a show, do whatever you want, make sure you do lock that in because the hotel rate goes quick. But now let's get into the top 5 tips on how to win Castles of Burgundy. We're doing 5 tips here, but this is one of those games where there isn't really a dominant strategy. There's no real meta around the game, which also makes it electric, which also makes sense why Castles players are so good at adapting to other board gaming circumstances, because they're so used to adapting in this game itself. And so I know that there's going to be a lot more tips that all of you are going to drop down below. Share your tips so that everybody can elevate their game and get better at this awesome, wonderful game. We're using this anniversary edition because that's the one that we're using in the WSBG. So that's what I'm going to use as our visual aids. And let's get into the tips. Tip number 1 has to deal with your workers, but specifically these beautiful workers, the lifeblood of your flexibility. And here's the tip: don't spend them in the first 2 rounds. Just make that a general rule for yourself. As the game progresses, you're going to need access to that flexibility, and workers are the only way to help you mitigate dice. And because of that, if you don't want to be dependent on a dice roll, and if you don't want to waste a turn getting more workers, you want to save them up, and you want to save them for a time where you don't have that peak efficiency. I see this in a lot of new players. You get so focused and tunnel vision on that one specific thing that you want in that opening hand of the game. Everyone gets so focused about completing a large section, completing a section sooner and getting those 10 points in that first round instead of the paltry, disgusting 8 points in that second round. And they use the workers, and people use those workers preemptively. They use them when their opponents weren't going for that particular tile. They forget to observe what's on their opponent's board. They use them when they have so many other options of equally good things to do, just because they do get tunnel visioned on completing that section. And they use them because they forget that they can sell goods with that dice that seemingly had no value. but happen to match up perfectly with your goods. There's just so much flexibility in this game that to use your workers in the first couple rounds is not a horrible thing and not a bad thing, but if you can avoid it, you will benefit in the long run. I kind of think of the workers as that experiment of the marshmallow, right? You know, when those kids got a marshmallow and they were told, hey, you can eat it now, but if you don't eat it, you get 2 marshmallows later on. Later on, there's going to be a tile that you really want, but you've already eaten your marshmallow. And then you're going to watch your opponents scoop them up with ease. And you're going to just hope and pray that a little piece of marshmallow falls out of their mouth so that you can have a taste. I think this metaphor has gone a little bit off the rails, but you get my meaning. Save your workers. Again, like all things, I've thought of about 6 closet cases at which in the opening round you may want to spend your worker. Maybe you're prioritizing getting a mine quickly over your opponent, and they have a 5 and you have a 4. Sure, maybe there's an incredible yellow tile out there that will just make you benefit a bajillion times and you think your opponent's going to go for it as well. Sure, but make sure that your opponent actually is going for it before you spend that sweet worker, because you're going to have another chance to get it, potentially. Now, reason number 4 deals with your board. And this is the knowledge that you will never fill your main board. Somebody has mathed it out. I remember seeing a Reddit post out there, maybe it was a BGG post, saying, if you play optimally, if you get everything right happening for you, you get every single building that chains together and gets you more buildings and lets you play additional things, even if that happens, you're still half a move short at completing your main board. You will never complete this thing. It is mathematically impossible. And so knowing that, suddenly it starts to be okay to leave things unfilled. Are you going to spend the time filling out this big section of 5? Or will you complete everything else? Is it worth dropping a quick animal here, or do you want to save them for this larger grid? Now, every map is a little bit different, obviously. And in WSBG, map balance is always a real consideration, and we want everybody to feel like they all had an equal chance at playing the game. But there might come a time early on where you decide if you're going to take any yellow tiles at all. What are the yellow tiles that have come up in the first 2 rounds? Have they been beneficial? Have you filled that out? Or have you lost the time at which that ability will be more efficient? That ability will take place and give you the bonuses that you need for that flexibility. I tend to not prioritize the yellow tiles, and I think that is a mistake, but it's experimenting with what are you going to fill and when. Has your opponent soared ahead in the turn order track game? And will they always be in turn order? Will you never go down the road of selling goods? Well, maybe you can then focus your attention on creating a really powerful pasture, right? It's these little decisions that happen, and finding out the right time to make that decision is important, and not stretching yourself so thin that you think you can do everything. I should have mentioned, if you want to check out the ring final, the 3-player ring final of Castles of Burgundy, that is over on the Dice Towers Network, commentated on by 2 really good Castles of Burgundy players, Alex Radcliffe and Professor Meg from Board Game Co. It was quite a good game. I was excited to watch it, and it did not disappoint. Of course I was excited to watch it. The winner of that game moves on to win the entire tournament and win $25,000 just playing board games. Like, come on. Not bad. Not bad for winning like 6 board games. Oh, I could do 6 wins in a row. You can? Okay, here's $25,000. I'm good at, a variety of board games. You are? Great. Here's $25,000. It's as simple as that. Now, talking about the board, that leads us to tip number 3, and this is an important tip. It's to prioritize flexibility on the board. In the base map of Castles of Burgundy, and that's what I'm going to use as an example here, this base map of Castles of Burgundy, the recommended starting position is in the middle. It's recommended not strategically. I've seen a lot of success by somebody placing up here on this other 6, but you're either going to place on the top 6 or the middle 6. You're not going to place on 5, and you're not going to place on 4, and that's because it doesn't prioritize board flexibility. The reason why they start beginners off in the middle is because you have access to one of every number other than the 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you start over here on the 6, you have access to only 4 numbers. 1, 5, 4, and 3. And so as you expand out your board, these determine your possibilities. These determine when you will be forced to spend workers to make optimal and efficient moves. And so what you don't want to have happen is to get into a scenario where you're only left with 2 or 3 numbers. 3 numbers is okay, but 2 numbers and below is really difficult to get out of. If we started up in this 4, for example, you would only get to play a 5, a 6, or a 3. You only have 3 numbers with which you can expand. And so if you roll a 1, a 2, or a 4, you're out of luck. You're forced to take tiles from the board. You have no choice as to using your dice to not take undesirable tiles or less exciting tiles from the board. You are forced into taking the tiles from the board, or you are forced into spending workers. Again, hopefully you've saved your workers at this point. And so I see a lot of players, and this has happened to me a lot when I started playing the game, you get so focused on the tiles and the abilities and the things that you're trying to take and hoping that you roll correctly and getting all those tiles in place and getting their powers and fighting for what you pull from the board, that you don't pay attention to the board state that you've created. And suddenly you're left with tiles that only can go in specific spots. And losing that flexibility, that's the key through line to this strategy guide. Losing that flexibility is the kiss of death in this game, because you're so dependent upon the dice that it can really work out. But a dice has 6 faces, and so it can also really not work out. You don't want to put yourself into that aspect. So whenever you can, it's best to expand in a sustainable way that gives you access to more numbers rather than less. If you have a decision to go one way or the other, all things being equal, don't just look at the types of terrain that are around it. Look at the specific numbers and keep that in your brain as a potential pathway to move forward, because it gives you that continued flexibility, allowing you to prioritize and get points where your opponents might struggle to do so. We talked about mines a little bit earlier, and tip number 2 has to relate to the black tiles in the center. It's don't waste your silverlings. This is, again, potentially a rookie play, but when you have money in a game like this, it feels really good to spend it. You want to spend that money early because you want to get more tiles, you want to get a little bit more action efficiency, and you want to complete those sections on the board earlier so you can benefit from their large point value. But silverlings are very powerful, and they are in short supply. There's a reason why there's really only 1 mine that comes up. In a 2-player game, there's only 1 mine that comes up on the board, and that's because of the power of the silverling, right? That's why you see a lot of people moving forward on the turn track, not just to move up on the turn track, but to get more goods so that they can sell them for additional silverlings, which can let you pull really powerful tiles from this middle section. This, again, flexibility is the name of the game, and this gives you flexibility. It gives you access to potential animals that you can start to look out for and chain for, or it can fill out your farm. It gives you access to that building that you've already gotten the yellow tile that gives you extra points for it. It gives you a lot of different access. And so what I see most often is people who aren't aware of the sorts of black tiles that can come out and who just want to spend their money for efficiency. Unless you have a clear plan of what benefit this is going to get you versus what it could get you in the future, don't spend your silverling. Unless there's a tile up there that you can immediately place, which lets you take any tile you want from the board using your silverlings as like a wild action when you would have had to use workers, don't use your silverlings. Like anything, it's easy to talk about the right and the wrong time to use these things, and there are so many edge cases that, again, will happen. But taking stock of the types of tiles that can come out or have yet to come out, and knowing your own silverling income, and knowing how often you want to spend time getting the silverlings, save it up for that big play. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll happen earlier. Again, that's the beauty of Castles of Burgundy, is that for every one of these tips, it could go the other way depending upon specific circumstances. I'm just trying to appeal to the general audience, and hopefully, if you're a savvy gamer enough to know what the difference is, well, you don't need the strategy guide and you can come compete in Castles of Burgundy now, can't you? And finally, tip number 1 for Castles of Burgundy, again, talking about that efficiency, I like to look at the times where you might get blocked, where you may not be able to have a good turn, and isolate the circumstances that led to that potentially not great turn. And that is right here by my head, this large area right here, Don't clog up your building queue without a concrete plan. Don't end your turn here with 3 buildings. If you can help it, or unless you have a bunch of workers that you're ready to spend, this right here, clogging up your building queue at the end of your turn, is the kiss of death. At least if you do it mid-turn, I assume you have a plan. But if you do it at the end of your turn, you are saying to your opponents, okay, don't worry, I can only take 1 tile. You're going to get on this treadmill, right? Unless you play 2 tiles on your next turn, you also won't be taking tiles from the center. And unless all 3 of those tiles can be put in any number, you have a chance that you will not be able to play them. Again, it really, really limits your flexibility. It determines what you do on your turn. And for the most part, you want to make sure that what you do on your turn is not predetermined and is not decided by the dice. It's counterintuitive. It's a game where you roll a lot of dice. Things might be determined by the dice. In fact, a lot is. But when you subject yourself to the dice gods, they can roll one way or the other. You never know how it's going to turn out. And in this situation, for example, where there's a 4, a 5, a 3, and a 2, I mean, this is an absolutely bonkers board with this stack of goods. But in this board, if a 1 and a 6 had been rolled together and your board is full, what do? Right? Pretend these don't exist and you only have access to those certain numbers. Still, what do? What if you don't have workers? Then you waste your turns by getting workers and then spending those workers to put 1 dice out. It's inefficient and it should be avoided as much as you can. And finally, the number 1 tip of Castles of Burgundy. Well, we turn over to, spoiler alert, the winner of 2023's Castles of Burgundy and our WSBG 2023 champion, Angela Tao.
Hello everyone, my name is Angela. I was the 2023 WSBG Castles of Burgundy ring winner and reigning champion. Thanks Chris for inviting me to share my 5 tips for this wonderful game. My tip number 1, you should study your map or study your board before you play. Based on the board you have, your strategy and priorities might be slightly different. For example, for board number 8, playing animals is more lucrative compared to some of the other boards. And for boards like 2, 4, and 7, yellow tile number 1, which lets you put 2 of the same buildings into the same region, is more valuable compared to other boards. On a more advanced level, the map will also affect your tempo as well. If a map has lots of smaller regions, you might want to prioritize on filling them up in the earlier games. Also, knowing your map will prevent you from getting blocked. For example, for map number 5, in order to reach the other side of the map, you need to play both green and yellow tiles. So sometimes if there are tiles that you don't even want, but that are important for you to jump over to the other side of the board, you should prioritize on getting them as well. The last thing you want is to take a bunch of tiles without being able to place them. My tip number 2, you should fight for boats if possible. In this game, boat determines your turn order, and turn order is extremely crucial, especially for a 2 to 3 player game. In early games, an earlier turn order can help you secure important tiles such as mine or castles, and in late games, it can help you secure scoring yellow tiles or animal tiles, which can be extremely important. Basically, they can either help you make or break your game. My tip number 3, if there are strong yellow tiles in the early phases of the game, make sure you get them. My personal favorite yellow tile is tile number 12, which can let you pick up a tile at a +1 or -1 discount. It is absolutely one of the strongest tiles in my opinion. If you see this tile appearing in round A or B, you should prioritize on getting it. In general, people tend to disagree on which yellow tiles are the best. Me personally, I prefer tiles that can give me better worker and silver flexibility, such as tile number 2, 3, 4, and 8. I found myself often in need of 1 or 2 workers in the last rounds, so having good flexibility throughout the game can mitigate for a lot of bad dice rolls. My tip number 4, you should always pay attention to what your opponents are doing, and don't be sorry to hurt them if it's necessary, especially in a 2 to 3 game. In a 4-player game, however, I find it harder to block others. But even for a 4-player game, paying close attention to what your opponents are doing, such as you can get ahead on finishing a color or grabbing better goods, is very important. To some extent, this game is a zero-sum racing game, so player interaction is actually very important compared to some of the other Euro games out there. Tip number 5, be ready to pivot at any time. Castles of Burgundy is a very tactical game. Based on the dice rolls, you might find better combos than what you've been planning for. And sometimes if you see others are competing heavily for boats, for example, and ignoring animals, it is better for you to pivot your strategy a little bit and pick up those cheap animal tiles before others realize it is too late. That's it, folks. I hope these 5 tips can help you a little bit in your future endeavors in Castles of Burgundy, and I hope to see you in Vegas this year.
But again, this is a tough one to do a strategy guide for because there is no dominant strategy. A good Castles of Burgundy player knows how to be adaptable, knows how to work on the fly, and knows when to capitalize on those dice rolls so that they can come out on top. So drop your tips down below as to how you school all of your friends in Castles of Burgundy. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, get your tickets to Vegas before April 1st if you want to capitalize on that discount. I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your comments down below because that's what we do here on the WSBG YouTube channel. We build community, we elevate all of our games so that we're all better players and we can all perform better on the world stage. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Chris George, and from all of us here at WSBG, what are you waiting for? Get in the game.